Welcome, bienvenue. Welcome to another property live stream. It's the first one of the week, in fact. This is Property Matters. And of course, we have with us Hamish McClay of Search Convey. And today's special guest is Tiffany Fairbrother of All Sorts. Now, Tiffany is well known to the show, and she's a person who has gone through a number of different housing situations. And today's one really falls completely into her wheelhouse because today's topic is, why are so many council homes sitting empty? Hamish, would you care to start us off?
Well, welcome to you all, I should say. An interesting week. We've got a full week this week, but it leads up to our bank holiday weekend. So many interesting things should be unfolding this week as well within our various sort of different podcasts. But today we speak about a sort of strange situation. Where I reside, Chilwell District Council, they've got themselves out of the social housing cycle, in that they no longer have any council houses anywhere. But what they do have is a monstrous number of buildings, or they did have a monstrous number of buildings. They owned the centre of Bicester, the council, at one stage.
Right.
Then midway through the sort of teens, so around about sort of 2014, 2015, they decided, in order to back up the dwindling resources, that they would flog them all off. And so they flogged off all these buildings. So we've got absent landlords everywhere. So we have got properties, and it's exactly the same throughout so many towns now. If they're not, they're either thriving or they're sort of pretty well dead. So we've got all these empty buildings. Now, they were council owned, and they were empty when they were council owned. But because the absent landlords, they're just sitting on the value and waiting for that value to go up.
Well, that's insane, surely.
Well, absolutely, because when you think about how many of those properties have not just something commercial on the ground floor, but all this living accommodation above them, it does seem an absurd way to go, because if they were taken hold of, there could be so many people that would bring something to the town centre, get people living there, so they'd be able to spend more money. So, but anyway, they don't work that one out. But we're not speaking about that today. What we're speaking about, we're speaking about why are so many council houses sitting empty. Now, in many areas, social housing, if you like, the social housing providers, which are various, right, sort of, can't think of the name of them.
Housing associations?
Yeah, but I'm just trying to think of the local one that, no, I can't remember the local one.
It'll come to you.
So I'll sold off to. But what's happening with the housing associations, they are able, because it's a financial element from their perspective. So they buy up all of these properties whilst they are meant to maintain and do other sorts of things. They can get away with sort of some kind of murderous things. I think what's happening, which is rather handy, that the changes in the law that we just sort of come about, they're not going to be able to get it. Because I don't know people who've moved into properties which are absolutely atrocious. They've had to redecorate them and all the rest of it, because the social housing people, the housing association, aren't particularly sort of worried about that. They just want the rents, and therefore they will fill their properties up because they want the rents. On the other hand, those councils that have retained council houses, there are a number of those which are empty. And you think, well, what a complete and utter waste. Why are they still empty? Because,
well, on top of that, we are putting people who should be in them into temporary accommodation.
Oh, yes.
And that's not.
However, this is the complicated. Certain funds, there are funds for temporary accommodation. So the temporary accommodation funds pay for that. They don't actually sort of think, well, hey, hang on, this would have a better sort of impact. But there are sometimes some good reasons why they are empty, and they're never very simple. But the money side of it there's a massive, great contribution to it, because many councils just don't have the money to actually spend on older properties to bring them up to date so people can move in, any more than they've got money to spend on new properties.
But it's part of this, Tiffany, welcome to the show. It's part of this to do with the fact that there are bunches of houses that need repairs, but the reparation process is so slow or so costly that either takes forever or just doesn't get done. Could that be part of the problem?
Yeah, I think it is. Yeah. So I think part of it is that the repairs once somebody moved out are astronomical. I was talking about it yesterday, saying that I think in a lot of situations it's a case of the councils don't or housing associations or whoever aren't that keen on doing the work once a tenant's in, so then the repairs get worse to the point where when somebody then moves out, the council then realise we've got a hell of a lot of work to do here before we can let somebody else move in.
Now, there is a law apparently called AWAB's law, with increasing repair obligations for social landlords. Could council become more cautious about reletting homes before every issue is fixed? AWAB's law came into force in the section of 27th of August 2025, so relatively recently,
yeah,
and started with emergency hazards and serious damp and mold. And I suspect that was what was used to eventually fix your ex location we've spoken about in the past.
I'm guessing so. So a lot of with the fact that a lot of old council houses, a lot of housing association houses are older houses, you will get the damp and mold issues. So now this law has come into place, I think it has get them a bit of a kick to say we need to get this done before we let anybody else in, and not just do a roundabout job of just patching it up and saying that's okay now for somebody to go and live in.
Hamish, should we just let people move in earlier and complete non-urgent repairs after occupation? Because that's what they seem to be shying away from.
Well, there is something to be said for that, because there are certainly people who could actually sort of move in there, but a number of people who are on this housing list, they're not people themselves that should be going into these properties. I think they're like when you speak about AWAB's law, that was brought about because of the seriousness of damp in places.
Right, and mold and so on. Yes.
On that subject again, it is something, the dampness and the mold that's actually generated. I mean, as we were looking at a couple of weeks ago that Tiff brought to light, one of the unbelievable, because I mean, Tiff had I can't remember her name now, but when she actually sort of came on and explained the state of that particular sort of property, and basically they were pushed in before all these things have been done. But what we have to remember, and this is one of the sad aspects, that some people, I don't know whether the change in law whether this will actually continue, but some people have taken on board something just to get in. Like Tiffany's sort of colleague there, she moved in because, crikey, I have to move. I have to have something. So right. This. But what will happen in that particular sort of case, as Tiffany actually pointed out at this time, when she moved out, all of I think she has moved out. Has she moved out, Tiffany?
Yeah, she's moved out, yeah.
When you think of the reparation that will be required to meet the current level of standards, that property will have been empty for a good time period to get all of that done. So there's two ways of looking at it. If you've got children, you don't want dampness, you don't want mold, you don't want any of these particular sort of things which can actually still be attracted. So there is a measure, but unfortunately, with the way the sort of legalities are, it's almost back to the same thing. You bring in too much regulation, you actually cause bigger problems than were there in the first place.
I've got an extra issue to throw at you. When there are several council homes that have been demolished, but are they truly replaced with affordable housing?
No,
I don't think they are.
The councils can't afford to do it because the builders can't afford to build them. That's the big problem, because they cost too much to build. But the reparation work, because the basis of so many of those buildings, and I think as Tiffany's explained to us, it's not that something doesn't immediately go mouldy. It has to take its time to get there. And it's the same with our health, of course. It doesn't, an awful lot of it doesn't happen overnight. It's progressively sort of over the years, as I've found out.
Yeah, I think your friend Tiffany, didn't she, her and her family contracted long-term health conditions from that?
They've constantly got bad chests and etc. now from living in the conditions they were living in for so long.
All right, so should councils be more flexible about matching people to properties, or would that create unfairness?
I think it would create unfairness. No, it's fine. I think it would create unfairness. I think they just have to be more, they need to realise more that it would be better to keep up with the upkeep of properties rather than the end of how property looks at the end of a tenancy.
Yes, because it's better to fix it during the process rather than wait till it's all gotten so bad.
Yeah.
Right. All right. So are councils being asked to maintain aging housing stock without actually any money to do it?
Yeah, absolutely. And this has been, I think this has been mentioned on one of the podcasts a couple of months ago.
Yes.
That we had a situation on my estate of a property a couple of doors down from us that was unoccupied for about 5 years due to subsidence. So the council, when the previous tenant moved out, the council came and assessed it because the previous tenant had moved out because of the subsidence. The cracks in the property were just getting too bad. So that tenant had moved out because of the subsidence and the cracks in the house. Council came out, said this will potentially need underpinning. We can't afford to underpin it. So I think at that point then they looked at selling it. But what they did in the end was they surveyed it, kept an eye on it. Once they'd looked at it once, they then left it for 12 months, came back, said, this hasn't moved in the last 12 months. We'll rent it out.
Goodness. Right. Well, who should pay to fix voids and problems? Local councils, central government, housing association, maybe even developers? What do you think, Hamish? Who should pay?
Well, it's relative to who actually is the owner of that particular property. The laws have changed, and I don't know anything about the laws. It's sort of outside my sort of knowledge. I mean, Tiff knows more of what goes on in this sort of, because she's more involved with what's going out there, sort of in the field, sort of, so to speak. But it's a combination of an awful lot of things. People the social housing people, they are in it for the money, and providing they're getting their rents, they're not too sort of fussed about it. They will go in and change things over. I mean, it sort of seems odd to me because I live in a 70 detached property, and the property next door, an absolute fortune's been spent on that over the years, mainly because of the demands of the sort of client people that have actually sort of moved in there. But the social housing people seem to be maintaining that one because the owner of the property, when I say the owner, the resident, the matriarch of she knows her way through all the channels. So she knows what strings to pull to actually sort of get things to actually sort of work for her. A lot of individuals don't know that. So what will actually happen in many of those places, they'll move somewhere, they'll notify the landlord, and it could be within social housing. Social housing might be a little bit more inclined to do it. When I say housing association houses are more inclined to actually carry out a bit of ongoing maintenance. But when you think about it, see, one of my particular sort of team, the property she lived into, and I think I might have mentioned this, the back door became distorted; it couldn't lock. Now she's a single lady; she couldn't lock her door overnight.
That's not ideal.
Things against the door. She could not lock the door when she left the property during the course of the day. It was considered an emergency, and it took 3 months for them to fix it.
Good Lord.
That is social housing for you, or housing association housing for you. I mean, so that's sort of quite appalling. And that was a simple task that they could have actually sort of done something about.
I've got to ask you a question, Hamish. We talk about a housing crisis, right? But it seems meaningless when we know that there are houses sitting vacant. It's a meaningless phrase. It's not a crisis. It's lack of allocation, right?
I wish it was as simple as that. What we do have is a combination of both. If we had more, I don't know whether it needs to come from central government, but they haven't got the money either. Where is the money to come from? But it's one of those particular sort of type of things. If there were residents in those properties, the council would be getting more money would be getting spent. There'd be more interest in shops and things like that developing in high streets, and therefore the business rates, they would be getting the business rates paid, because of course they screwed up by increasing the business rates. And what happens when you increase business rates? The number of businesses go down. What happens to your income level? It goes down as well. And they haven't looked at it from that particular perspective. So the responsibility of a landlord, the thing is, the majority of landlords are responsible outside of housing association, outside of council. Well, that's a bit unfair, I suppose, in a way. But I need to draw a brush somehow or other. But the general landlord is going to maintain that particular property because he maintains a good relationship with his clients. Unfortunately, within the social housing sort of framework, whether it be housing association or council housing, it doesn't necessarily work on the same basis, and rarely does. Housing association want the rent. If you keep paying the rent, they'll just let you sort of let the house rot in a way. But the other aspect is the councils are desperately short. And I don't know when it was like sort of Tiff was sort of saying about where you used to live or where you currently live. You're on top of the mines or something.
Oh, here. Yeah, here.
So you wow. So there's probably a problem with subsidence for some housing.
The whole estate, majority of the city really has got subsidence issues because of the mines.
Okay, we're coming towards the end of the podcast, but I've got a more interesting question because this is a moral one. Is there, and this is for you, Tiffany, a moral difference between empty second home and empty council home?
No.
So it is not morally right if you've got an empty second home that you don't at least attempt to fill it with people who are desperately looking for somewhere to live.
If somebody's got a second home, then it goes without question. If somebody needs a home, somebody needs a home.
Hamish, what are your thoughts?
Well, on that particular, it's a little bit difficult to ascertain because very often people are entitled to do what they wish to do reasonably. And we're not speaking about entitled people. If somebody has money and they think, well, crikey, I've got to work, I've got to live in London because of my work. But by golly, I love to get away to Cornwall. I mean, I know, for example, when I was going back to the teaching, when I was teaching in private schools, it was the Lord Mayor of London, not the elected, not the particular one we actually sort of have. His son used to attend the school, and they'd come up and they'd pick him up on the Friday, and they'd go and spend time in their Oxfordshire home. Beautiful, beautiful estate it was. Because funny enough, I did a local search on it after they sort of left, which was absolutely sort of fascinating. In Minster Lovell, a lovely little place on the edge of the Cotswolds. Now that was fantastic for them. You know, should they have to put somebody in there so they can't actually go there at weekends? And
It's such an interesting question. I know my left wing friends will be chomping at the bit on this one. You know, property is theft, etc., and all that. And then my right wing friends say we can buy whatever you want, have as many homes as you want. And I think there's got to be a line, because I know a lot of let's not give them a nationality. Foreign nationals perhaps buy properties in London, for instance, perfectly, you know, in Camberwell and Shoreditch or whatever, and then leave them empty as investment properties.
Yes.
And I think that's
they're not second homes, though, are they?
no.
I think we need to put this. If this is a second home, it can be a home. You know, it's you know,
As long as you're using it regularly, yes.
Absolutely, and you can use it all the rest of it. But the sort of going back to it, there is a difference. There is a moral but it's not so much a moral difference, because we would like to be able to make a moral decision, and people will make moral assumptions based on fact and say, and I mean, I don't know, but Tiffany would probably agree with this. But if the council hasn't got the money, the council hasn't got the money. But it's down to planning. They just haven't planned it for a period of time. They haven't gone in there and sorted out. They don't check up to make sure that a landlord will check up and make sure that his residents, that those that are in his properties, are they're quite happy with what's going on. And they'll keep an eye on things.
Well, a good landlord will, yes. Yeah. Absolutely. Yes. Let's caveat that.
No, they don't do that in council. Do they do that in council property, Steph?
So when somebody moves into a council property, well, I can only speak for my own council, but as far as my own council is concerned, somebody moves into a property, you get a visit from your housing officer once you've moved in. You then get a 6 month, you're meant to have a 6 month review of a visit from your housing officer. 9 times out of 10, that doesn't happen. And then you're just left to it. As long as you pay your rent, you get no complaints. You've got no complaints. They just leave you to it.
So you still wreck the joint if you so wish.
Well,
yeah. As long as
theoretically, but Tiffany,
neighbours that complain.
Exactly. But Tiffany, one could live in absolute squalor in a council property, and the council would potentially never know. Yes.
Yeah.
Which is, and I'm sure it does happen. Hamish, thank you so much. It's a great conversation. Tiffany, thanks for taking part today. And to all of you watching, I hope you enjoyed this. Plenty more property podcasting to fill your boots with. We've got tomorrow, It's a Kind of Magic, the Association of Independent Personal Search Agents, of which Hamish is the current chairman, no, it's not. Yeah, that is. And on Wednesday we've got. I'm losing my way. And on Thursday we've got Property Quorum, and of course we finish up the week with a rousing round at Cladding Matters, which I hear this week could be quite spicy. We'll have to find out. Thank you so much, Hamish McClay. Thank you, Tiffany Fairbrother, and thank you all you for watching with us. I see a whole bunch of you came in halfway through. Please do check out if you want to find out previous ones. All you have to go is on YouTube and look up Spilling the Proper Tea. There's lots in there for you to get your teeth into. Until next time I see you, please keep your feet on the ground, keep reaching for the stars, and of course, look after your mental health. Bye-bye now.